Today, we're uncovering those secret behaviours each personality type indulges in when they think no one is looking. Ever wondered what your friends, family, or that mysterious coworker does behind closed doors? Get ready for some surprising revelations as we explore what MBTI types secretly do when nobody's watching. 1. INTJ, the Mastermind's private universe. When nobody's watching, INTJs transform their space into a personal laboratory of ideas. That serious strategic planner you know. They're secretly dancing to obscure electronic music while simultaneously mapping out the next 5 years of their life on colour-coded spreadsheets. An INTJ might spend hours researching the most random topics, from ancient Sumerian farming techniques to the aerodynamics of paper airplanes, just because a question popped into their head during breakfast. What's truly hilarious is catching an INTJ talking to themselves, having full-blown debates where they argue both sides with equal passion. But that's inefficient, they'll exclaim to an empty room, countering their own point moments later. And despite their reputation for emotional detachment, many INTJs secretly binge-watch sappy romance movies, analysing character motivations while pretending they're not tearing up at the predictable, yet somehow still affecting happy ending. 2. INFJ, the counsellor's hidden world. Behind closed doors, INFJs shed their composed exterior and indulge in elaborate daydreams that would put Hollywood scriptwriters to shame. They create intricate scenarios where they save the day with the perfect advice or finally tell that one person exactly what they think. Conversations that will never actually happen but feel incredibly satisfying in their mind. What would shock you is finding an INFJ singing dramatically into a hairbrush, complete with choreography and facial expressions that rival Broadway performers. These typically reserved individuals transform into theatre kids when alone. They might also practice social interactions in advance, rehearsing multiple versions of the same conversation to prepare for every possible outcome. "Nice weather we're having," they'll say to their mirror, then immediately critique their delivery. "Too generic. Try again with more genuine interest." Most surprisingly, these compassionate souls sometimes keep a secret. "People who annoyed me today" journal, where they vent frustrations they'd never express in public, complete with witty comebacks they wish they'd said. 3. ENFJ, the protagonist's private stage. When the spotlight dims and no one's around, ENFJs, those natural-born leaders and motivators, collapse into their comfiest clothes and binge-watch reality TV shows they publicly claim to despise. The production value is terrible, they'll announce to friends, while secretly knowing every contestant's backstory and rooting passionately for their favourites. What's truly amusing is catching an ENFJ practicing inspirational speeches in the shower, complete with dramatic pauses and hand gestures. These speeches range from accepting imaginary humanitarian awards to delivering the perfect pep talk to a friend in need. They might spend hours curating the perfect social media post only to delete it entirely, deciding it doesn't authentically represent their values. The biggest surprise: despite their people-oriented nature, ENFJs secretly relish their alone time, sometimes cancelling plans just to enjoy a quiet evening of self-care, all while texting friends about how devastated they are to miss the gathering. "I would absolutely be there if I could," they'll type, while happily applying a face mask and queuing up their guilty pleasure playlist. 4. ENTJ, the commander's private domain. When nobody's watching, ENTJs, agueteurs, those strategic, decisive leaders, secretly indulge in meticulous planning sessions that would make even their organised colleagues stare in awe. That assertive visionary who's always pushing the team forward. They're creating detailed 5-year plans for their personal life, complete with contingency strategies, milestone markers, and efficiency metrics that could run a small nation. What's truly amusing is catching an ENTJ rehearsing difficult conversations in advance, playing both parts, and refining their arguments to perfection. "No, that's not persuasive enough," they'll mutter to themselves, restructuring their points for maximum impact. These efficiency-focused individuals maintain secret improvement projects for everyone in their life, mentally noting how their friends, family and colleagues could optimize their potential if they just follow the ENTJ's unshared but comprehensive development plan. Perhaps most surprising is discovering an ENTJ's rare moments of self-doubt. They might keep private journals analysing their leadership decisions, questioning their effectiveness with a vulnerability they'd never display publicly. Could I have handled that situation better? They'll reflect, before quickly drafting 3 alternative approaches for next time. Most endearing is finding an ENTJ indulging in surprisingly whimsical activities to decompress, building elaborate models, creating fantasy sports leagues with complex statistical analyses, or developing unnecessarily detailed ranking systems for their favourite films, applying their strategic brilliance to pursuits that have no practical value beyond their own enjoyment. 5. INFP, the Mediator's secret sanctuary. Alone in their personal sanctuary, INFPs transform into characters from their favourite books, movies, or entirely original stories of their creation. These quiet dreamers might spend hours perfecting a skill they've never shown anyone, from writing poetry to learning obscure instruments like the theremin or kalimba, simply because it speaks to their soul. What would make you laugh is discovering an INFP having heated moral debates with fictional characters. "No, Hamlet, that's not what I'm saying at all," they'll exclaim to their empty room. They curate elaborate music playlists for everyday activities, with specific songs for brushing teeth versus washing dishes, each selected to match the emotional tone they associate with the task. Perhaps most surprising is their occasional dive into dark humour territory. These compassionate idealists sometimes create hilariously cynical parodies of motivational content when alone. "Just follow your dreams," they'll mock announce in an infomercial voice. "It's not like you need food or shelter," before dissolving into giggles and returning to their genuine idealism with renewed perspective. 6. ENFP, the champion's private carnival. When the door closes, ENFPs, those social butterflies everyone knows, immediately kick off their shoes and launch into what can only be described as a one-person variety show. They'll transition from interpretive dancing to their favourite upbeat song to practicing different accents in the mirror to suddenly researching medieval farming techniques because a random thought triggered their curiosity. What's absolutely hilarious is catching an ENFP in their idea tornado mode, walls temporarily covered with sticky notes connected by string like a detective solving a case. Except it's just them mapping out their next creative project or planning the perfect themed party. They might record voice memos of random thoughts throughout the day, then listen back and rate them on a scale of genuinely brilliant to "what was I thinking?" These perpetually enthusiastic individuals secretly maintain collections of unfinished projects, occasionally pulling them out to add a few more touches before being distracted by the next shiny idea. And despite their reputation for being open books, ENFPs have secret interests they keep private simply because they enjoy having something that's just for them, whether it's an obscure podcast about fungal networks or a spreadsheet tracking patterns in their dreams. 7. INTP, the Logician's private laboratory. Behind closed doors, INTPs transform into mad scientists of the mind, disappearing down rabbit holes of obscure knowledge until they emerge hours later wondering why it's suddenly dark outside. That quiet analyzer you know might be dismantling household appliances just to see how they work, creating elaborate diagrams connecting seemingly unrelated concepts, or writing code to solve problems that don't actually exist yet, but might someday. What would have you in stitches is discovering an INTP arguing passionately with a YouTube video, pausing repeatedly to deliver point-by-point rebuttals to an educator who can't hear them. "That's a logical fallacy," they'll exclaim to their screen. These seemingly detached thinkers secretly maintain immaculately organised collections of random items, bottle caps, interesting rocks, or vintage calculator parts, categorised by systems only they understand. Perhaps most surprising is catching an INTP performing dramatic readings of technical manuals or scientific papers, complete with voice changes for different sections. "The methodology," they'll announce in a booming announcer voice, switching to a whisper for yielded unexpected results. They might also keep journals of observations about human behaviour, analysing social interactions like they're documenting an alien species, which to them sometimes feels accurate. 8. ENTP, the debater's secret playground. When nobody's watching, ENTPs transform their space into an intellectual playground where they can argue with themselves, playing devil's advocate against their own ideas just for the mental exercise. They might spend hours watching videos at 2x speed on topics they know nothing about, only to emerge as self-proclaimed experts ready to casually drop their new knowledge in future conversations. What's absolutely hysterical is finding an ENTP practicing facial expressions in the mirror. Not for emotional communication like some types, but to perfect the exact raised eyebrow that will most effectively unsettle someone during their next friendly debate. Too aggressive, they'll mutter, adjusting slightly. More curious condescension. These idea generators secretly record themselves explaining complex concepts, then critique their own explanations for logical holes. A personal debate prep no one else witnesses. The most surprising revelation: despite their reputation for challenging everything, ENTPs sometimes indulge in extraordinarily silly activities, building elaborate domino setups throughout their home, creating unnecessarily complex Rube Goldberg machines to perform simple tasks, or developing intricate ranking systems for everyday items. Pencils with erasers outrank pens in versatility but underperform in commitment metrics. Well, guys, they'll decide, documenting their findings in a spreadsheet no one else will ever see. 9. ISFJ, the defender's hidden rituals. Behind closed doors, ISFJs bubais, those reliable, practical caretakers, indulge in surprisingly meticulous personal rituals. They might maintain elaborate collections organised in systems so precise they could make professional archivists jealous. Baseball cards, alphabetised by player's middle name. Recipe collection, cross-referenced by country of origin, main ingredient, and cooking time. What would shock you is discovering an ISFJ's secret guilty pleasure research sessions. These traditionally minded individuals might spend hours investigating the latest bizarre internet trends or celebrity gossip, not to participate, but to stay informed about what their loved ones might be exposed to. I need to understand what this TikTok challenge involves, they'll mutter while taking detailed notes. These nurturing souls occasionally indulge in unpredictably specific fantasies, not of fame or adventure, but of minor confrontations gone perfectly. Next time Susan criticises my casserole, I'll calmly mention I used her recipe, they'll rehearse, imagining the satisfying conclusion. Perhaps most surprising is catching an ISFJ engaging in what can only be described as preemptive nostalgia, documenting current moments in journals or photographs while already feeling sentimental about the present, creating memory collections for future comfort during times they're already anticipating might be difficult. 10. ESFJ, the provider's private indulgences. When the social butterfly ESFJ finally gets alone time, they immediately shed their perfect host persona and indulge in surprisingly rebellious behaviours. By their standards anyway. That friend who always remembers everyone's birthdays and brings homemade cookies to every gathering, they're secretly binge-watching trashy reality TV while eating cereal straight from the box, a far cry from the perfectly plated meals they serve others. What's hilarious is catching an ESFJ practicing conversations in advance, complete with different tones and approaches depending on who they're preparing to talk with. For Karen, more enthusiasm, they'll mutter, adjusting their smile in the mirror. For Bob, more professional concern. These harmony seekers maintain secret lists of gift ideas for everyone in their life, organised by occasion, price range and personal preference. Spreadsheets so detailed they border on reconnaissance dossiers. The most surprising revelation? These seemingly conventional types sometimes rebel against their own rules in private. They might deliberately leave dishes in the sink overnight, gasp, wear mismatched socks just to prove they can be spontaneous, or dance with wild abandon to music their friend group would never expect them to enjoy. No one needs to know about my death metal phase, they'll think while headbanging around their perfectly decorated living room. 11. ISTJ, the inspector's secret systems. Alone in their meticulously organised space, ISTJs, those reliable pillars of tradition and order, secretly maintain even more elaborate systems than anyone suspects. That coworker with the tidy desk? At home, they've catalogued their book collection using a personally developed decimal system that makes Dewey look disorganized, with cross-referencing capabilities that would impress library scientists. What would make you chuckle is discovering an ISTJ's private fact-checking rituals. These detail-oriented individuals might spend hours verifying information from casual conversations, keeping records of corrected facts they'll never actually share. Jennifer said Jupiter has 67 moons, they'll mutter while updating their personal knowledge database, but it's actually 79 as of 2022. Perhaps most amusing is catching an ISTJ indulging in carefully scheduled spontaneity time, literally blocking off 30 minutes to do something unplanned, often ending up researching how to be more spontaneous instead. The greatest surprise? Despite their reputation for conventionality, many ISTJs harbour impressively specific in case of emergency plans for scenarios no one else has considered. Zombie apocalypse? They've identified optimal escape routes, catalogued potential resources, and calculated survival probabilities for various scenarios, complete with colour-coded maps and supply inventories updated quarterly. 12. ESTJ, the executive's private kingdom. When nobody's watching, ESTJs, those take-charge, efficiency-focused leaders, secretly indulge in meticulously organised hobby collections that would astonish their colleagues. That boss who demands excellence and keeps the office running like clockwork. They're arranging their vintage action figure collection by release date, character alliance, and articulation points, maintaining a spreadsheet with current market values. What's truly amusing is finding an ESTJ creating detailed improvement plans for random situations. They might draft comprehensive renovation schedules for friends' homes they visited once, or develop efficiency systems for local businesses they frequent. The coffee shop could reduce wait time by 37% if they just move the register 3 feet to the left, they'll mutter while sketching improved floor plans nobody asked for. These traditionally minded individuals sometimes practice recreational rule-breaking in surprisingly minor ways, using the express checkout with 12 items instead of 10, or deliberately assembling furniture without reading instructions first, just to prove they can handle chaos if necessary. Perhaps most surprising is discovering an ESTJ's secret softer side. They might maintain detailed records of team members' preferences and achievements, not just for productivity purposes, but because they genuinely care, though they'd rather reorganize the entire filing system than admit it directly. 13. ISTP, the craftsman's hidden workshop. Behind closed doors, ISTPs transform into mad inventors, tinkering with projects so complex and unusual that visitors would be astonished. That quiet, practical person you know might have disassembled and rebuilt every appliance in their home. Not because anything was broken, but just to see if they could improve it. Their refrigerator now inexplicably runs at 2% higher efficiency and makes a subtle purring sound they find satisfying. What would have you in stitches is discovering an ISTP's collection of half-finished projects, each abandoned at precisely the moment they figured out the challenging part. I know how to fix it now, they'll shrug, already moving on to the next puzzle. These mechanically minded individuals secretly film themselves performing difficult technical skills, not to share online but to analyse and perfect their technique with the critical eye of a professional coach. Most surprising is catching an ISTP. In rare moments of sentimentality, they might keep a drawer of seemingly random objects that others would consider junk, but each item represents a problem they solved or a skill they mastered. That bent paperclip, it helped them pick their first lock. The odd-shaped washer, key component in their homemade motorcycle repair. Each item tells a story of competence and ingenuity that they'd never articulate out loud, but privately treasure. 14. ESTP, the entrepreneur's covert operations. When the spotlight dims and no one's around, ESTPs, those charming action-oriented thrill-seekers, engage in surprisingly methodical practice sessions for skills they make look effortless in public. That friend who naturally excels at every physical activity. They're secretly watching instructional videos at 2 a.m, then practicing bottle flips or pool tricks for hours to maintain their reputation for effortless cool. What's absolutely hilarious is catching an ESTP rehearsing witty comebacks and stories before social events, testing different punchlines to find the perfect delivery that will seem completely spontaneous later. And then I said, no, wait, then I said, they'll repeat, adjusting timing and emphasis. These action-oriented types maintain secret collections of specialized knowledge about surprisingly practical topics. They can tell you the fastest route across town at any time of day, know which restaurants have the shortest wait times on Friday nights, or remember the exact aisle locations for obscure items in every local store. Perhaps most surprising is discovering an ESTP's private strategic planning sessions. Despite their reputation for impulsivity, many map out detailed risk-reward scenarios for major decisions, calculating probabilities and preparing contingencies like chess grandmasters. Plan B through F are ready, they'll think, while confidently announcing they're just going with the flow. 15. ISFP, the composer's secret canvas. Alone in their personal space, ISFPs, those quiet artistic souls, transform their environment into ever-changing expressions of their inner world. That friend with the seemingly simple decorating style? When no one's looking, they rearrange their furniture weekly, testing how different configurations affect the mood and flow of energy in their space, creating entirely new aesthetics just to experience them briefly before changing everything again. What would surprise you is discovering an ISFP's secret collection of creative works they've never shared. Drawers filled with poetry, hard drives containing music compositions, or closets storing paintings. Each piece a perfect expression of a feeling they experienced but chose to keep private. It wasn't created for anyone else, they'll explain if caught. These typically gentle individuals sometimes engage in surprisingly bold aesthetic experiments on themselves before settling on their public image. Hair colours, clothing styles, or makeup techniques tested and perfected in private, with only the most authentic expressions making it to their public presentation. Perhaps most amusing is catching an ISFP creating elaborate backstories for everyday objects in their home. That slightly chipped mug? In their mind, it's the sole survivor of a shipwreck, carrying stories of adventure across treacherous seas before finding sanctuary in their kitchen cabinet. A rich inner narrative no one else will ever hear, but that brings them quiet joy with each morning's coffee. 16. ESFP, the performer's secret rehearsals. When the curtain falls and the ESFP is finally alone, these natural-born entertainers don't actually stop performing, they just become their own audience. That friend who seems effortlessly charismatic at every gathering. They're secretly practicing dance moves in front of the mirror, experimenting with outfits your fashion blogger would envy, and recording themselves telling stories to perfect their timing before unveiling these spontaneous talents in public. What's absolutely hysterical is catching an ESFP in full conversation with their pets, houseplants, or even furniture, complete with different voices for each character in their domestic audience. Don't you judge me, Mr. Ficus. They'll admonish their houseplant while trying on the fifth outfit of the evening. These sensory-focused individuals maintain surprisingly detailed journals, not of their thoughts or feelings, but of sensory experiences worth repeating. Coffee shop on 5th Street, cinnamon blend, window seat, afternoon sun hits perfectly at 2:17 p.m, complimentary biscotti, they'll note, creating a catalogue of perfect moments to revisit. Perhaps most surprising is discovering an ESFP's occasional need for absolute silence and stillness. These seemingly perpetual motion machines sometimes sit in complete quiet, processing emotions with an intensity that would shock those who only see their light-hearted public persona. I just need to feel everything fully, they'll explain if discovered, before bouncing back into performer mode with a dazzling smile that reveals just a hint of the depth beneath. So there you have it. The secret lives of all 16 MBTI types when nobody's watching. Which one sounded most like you or someone you know? Remember, while personality types give us fascinating insights, we're all wonderfully complex beings with unique quirks and habits that can't be fully captured in any system. Thanks for joining us on MBTI Spectrum. If you enjoyed this peek behind personality curtains, hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments which MBTI secret behaviour surprised you most.